Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. In the studio again with a wonderful guest by popular demand. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sarah Myhill is back. Hello, Sarah.
Richard, very nice of you to invite me back. It's lovely to be here and see you and Julia again.
Yes, Julia is just off to the side at the moment. Now, it was such a fantastic and fascinating interview that we had before. And we covered a number of things, obviously, to do with health. Now, and I was thinking, what are we going to talk about? And you'd said that you've been looking after a patient of yours who is of a remarkable age. How old is he?
Tony, he's been living with me for about 7 years, and we celebrated his 101st birthday last month.
Blimey, 101st birthday. So there must be, you know, because you get these people who are 100, what are they called?
Centenarians.
Centenarians. And they often say, you know, what is the secret of your long life? So there might be a secret, so we're going to talk to you about that.
Well, of course, the secret is not to die before you get there.
Well, that's true. do everything you can to stay alive. Like, don't get run over by a bus and things like that. But other than that, I mean, so 101, that's a huge era to go through. I mean, you've seen, so he must have been born, just after the First World War?
Correct. And he fought through the Second World War in the Navy. He went in as a 17-year-old in 1939 and wrote the most fantastic book about it, Life on the Rolling Main.
Wow.
And so he is a legend in his own right.
Gosh.
And today, he has no pathology. He is as sharp as a tack. He has a wonderful store of anecdotes. And not only does he remember all the stories, he also remembers to whom he told the stories. So he'll say, I know you know this story, I know you this story, but you don't, and off he goes. And he's still telling me stories that I haven't heard before.
So that, I mean, how rare is that, to have no pathology at that sort of age?
I think it's very unusual. He has no cancer, no heart disease. He has good genes. That's a very good start.
Right.
His family are long-lived. But he's eaten well all his life. And the last 7 years, of course, he's had my paleo ketogenic diet because he has no choice.
Right, yes. If you're under Dr. Myhill, that's the thing. That's interesting. So the genes then is very good. It's very useful if you've got them. But if you don't have good genes, is that a prerequisite? Because you hear people who say, well, you know, my father had this, my mother had this, and am I going to get this?
No. Well, as the World Health Organization will tell you, 95% of disease is environmental. Less than 5%, and probably nearer 2%, is genetic. So even if you don't have the genes, that doesn't mean to say that's it. So much disease is gene-environment interaction, and the environment is the big thing. So how you live your life is crucial to the age that you're going to live to.
And so what are the things that we should be concentrating on?
Well, let's look at the three main pathologies. So
yes.
That's cancer, dementia and heart disease. They are the three big things that people are dying from. And let's start with dementia, because that in women is now the commonest cause of death in this country.
Is it really?
It's absolutely shocking. And there's some wonderful work done by Patrick Holden, and he's got a lovely website called Food for the Brain. Free, do look at it. But as he points out, there are three big factors that prevent dementia. And the first is a low carbohydrate diet. With a ketogenic diet, you can reverse dementia. Not my words. Consultant neurologist Dale Bredson, California, he reverses dementia with a ketogenic diet. So carbohydrates are very bad news.
And that's because of the sugars that they produce, is it?
Well, yes, because all carbohydrates are digested in the gut to sugar. And sugar is sticky stuff. It's sticky in the hand, and biochemically it's sticky. And it sticks to everything.
Right.
It sticks to the lining of blood vessels and damages them, and that's the main driver of arterial disease. It sticks to brain proteins and converts them into prions. It encourages bacteria and yeast to grow. Because all pathology has an infectious driver. At the root of all cancers, all dementias, all heart disease, there is a chronic infection. And all microbes love sugar. And if you're eating a high sugar, high carbohydrate diet, you are feeding these microbes, and that drives pathology. So the there's essentially a two-pronged approach to keep that microbial load down. First of all, don't feed them.
Yeah.
So do a ketogenic diet. And secondly, take natural substances which kill them. Like my two favourites, of course, are vitamin C and iodine, but green tea, herbal teas, good raw organic food, all has antimicrobial activity. So eating well is just crucially important.
And that's something that, a lot of people do scrimp on eating well, don't they?
Yes.
They end up going to, and often it's not their fault. I mean, the environment that we live in, the society and the big brands are pushing.
Absolutely, because the thing about sugars and carbohydrates is that they are addictive. Now, we lead stressful lives. Who doesn't lead a stressful life? And we use addiction to deal with stress.
Yes.
And the obvious ones are cigarette smoking, alcohol, caffeine to give us a bit of energy. But the most pernicious and an unrecognised one is sugars and carbohydrates. They are addictive. We eat them in an addictive way. You have a sugar and a carbohydrate and you get a little upper, and then you get withdrawal symptoms that makes you hungry and makes you crave, and you go back to eating them again. So I have every sympathy for the carbohydrate addict, because they are doing it. It's cheap, it's convenient, it's quick, it gives them instant release of their stress, and that's what makes them so addictive.
So if you were to go back to the times of your hunter-gatherer, your Paleolithic sort of man, in which your keto diet sort of stems from, I'm guessing that sugars and carbohydrates were harder to come across.
They were rare foods. They were only there in the autumn when we had a windfall of fruit and nuts and seeds and pulses or whatever. And we ate them in an addictive way then, and we got fat. And of course, fat is survival value for the winter. It's
Yes.
totally desirable.
Right.
And of course, primitive woman stopped eating carbohydrates in the winter because there weren't any. So she had no choice. She survived the winter on her fat stores and probably hibernating, so sleeping long hours in the winter and keeping warm. And then when the spring came along, then energy would return, and she'd get back to hunter-gathering and maybe farming to grow that food again. But yes, she had carbohydrates, but only for a window of time.
Yes.
And now we have carbohydrates all year round because we can.
And they're super as well, aren't they? They're, when you think of sugars, they are refined to the nth degree.
Correct.
So although it's that word refined, you think, oh, but that's been refined. But actually that's a negative, really.
That's right. And that gives us another problem, because the hormonal response to sugars and carbohydrates do not depend on how much sugar or carbohydrate you have. It depends on the rate of change. So
Right.
if you have, say, a sugar, it's very rapidly absorbed and your blood sugar rises very quickly. Now, of course, running a high blood sugar is very dangerous, and the body's response to that is to produce insulin, and insulin brings blood sugar down by shunting into fat. But the amount of insulin released is proportionate to the rate of change. So if your blood sugar goes up very quickly, you get a lot of insulin. If you get a lot of insulin, then the blood sugar comes down very quickly. The brain panics, it thinks it's running out of fuel, and it pours out the stress hormone, which is adrenaline. So when you're on the refined sugars and carbohydrates, and that includes fruit sugar, of course, and fruit juices, you get these very drastic changes in blood sugar going up, insulin being produced, coming down very rapidly, adrenaline being produced, and that's what drives most Western pathology.
So is it that, because I seem to have read this, that the adrenaline, I mean, it's good in the fight and flight mode, but we would only be in that fight and flight mode for a very short period of time. Most of the time, we're in a more passive mode.
Yes.
So the adrenaline.
Correct. But being on sugars and carbohydrates, every time you eat a food or a snack or whatever, you're putting yourself into that fight or flight mode effectively.
Right.
And that is disastrous for our metabolism.
Gosh, yeah. So we were talking about dementia just
Yes.
then and gone on.
Yes.
So what was the other things you said? Heart disease and...
well, the three main causes of dementia. First of all, high carbohydrate diets.
Right.
Secondly, fish oils. We all need some fish oils every day. Or fish. And thirdly, homocysteine. Now, homocysteine is such a mega problem, but hardly discussed by the doctors and the cardiologists. And the reason for that is that doctors receive their training from Big Pharma. They don't receive their training from proper proper educated physicians like I did when I was at medical school. And homocysteine is a measure of our ability to heal and repair. So homocysteine is a marker of the methylation cycle, and the methylation cycle is how we heal and repair. So if your homocysteine is either too high or too low, then we don't heal and repair efficiently.
Oh, I see. So it's not that if you're high in it, then you repair much more quickly.
No. We need an optimal amount. It's a marker of that.
Right.
So what we should do is we damage ourselves by day, inevitably, just doing things, just talking, just walking, and then during sleep we heal and repair. Now, if you can't heal and repair because your methylation cycle is malfunctioning, then you just gradually degenerate. Now, homocysteine can be easily corrected with B vitamins, the methylated B vitamins, B6, folic acid, and B12. So those are essential part of a good healthy diet to make sure we get those vitamins.
And where would you find those in natural foods?
Oh, in meat, guess what? In meat, in fish, in eggs are great sources of them, and many vegetables as well contain those essential B vitamins. But if you look at life from the point of view of Big Pharma, its responsibilities are not to patients, to people, it's to shareholders.
Yes.
They want to make money.
Yes.
So what Big Pharma wants are lots of rather sick people demanding their drugs and their medications. So the last thing they want are cheap, simple interventions like good, healthy diets, like vitamin C, like iodine, like normal homocysteines, because that stops people getting sick. And you don't want that if you're a drug company.
No.
And medicine is run by Big Pharma.
And that's, I mean, that's a whole conversation in and of itself, isn't it? Why the medical industry needs to be, it needs to be extremely wealthy rather than sufficiently wealthy to provide just those drugs that are actually beneficial rather than some that have a million side effects and keep you in that loop.
Yes, it's greed, not need.
Yes.
I mean, the reason why Big Pharma took off is because one of the first group of drugs that they started to develop were the antibiotics. And antibiotics and antimicrobials are miracle drugs. I would hate to practice medicine without them. They save lives daily. And people came to believe that, there's a pill for every ill.
Yes.
And of course there isn't. And whilst antibiotics and the like have curative potential, most other drugs are symptom suppressing. They're not addressing the root cause of disease.
Yes.
And therein lies the rub.
And I mean, my mum was and I can't remember if I mentioned this on the last time that we did the interview, but my mum got to that point where, as you say, this whole idea that no matter what you did to yourself, there's a pill that could correct you. And she knew she was an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And so as an alcoholic, not only she was damaging her liver and all those sort of things, but she would get ill a lot and be depressed and what have you. And she knew that antibiotics would help her. And she just would go to the doctor and sit there, often in a drunken stupor, but demand, I will not leave until I've got this prescription of antibiotics. And then she would only take 2 or 3 and not take the rest. And you would have medicine cupboard full of all these sort of drugs. And a bit like the alcohol, I would be spiriting that away, as well as all these empty or half empty boxes of stuff that were well out of date. But she would go, I need one. I'll just go and take a pill.
Oh dear.
So I, from a doctor's point of view, it must be very difficult trying to convince people that actually these white pills don't always fix the ills.
People are not stupid. And I started off in general practice in 1982 and started to learn all these sort of nutritional techniques. And the people who came to see me were in 2 groups. There's some people who just said, "No, give me the pills. That's all I'm interested in." And there are some people who were genuinely interested in the cause of their illness. Why do I have headaches? Why do I have arthritis? Why do I have eczema? And of course, I didn't know all the answers then. And believe you me, I don't know all the answers now. But at least we're asking the right question. We're asking the question why.
Yes.
And we should always be asking the question why. And so often headaches or irritable bowel or arthritis could be cured by simple dietary changes. Cut out the major allergen. Dairy products and gluten grains came up time and time again. So that's how my medicine evolved. But with any problem, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor or an engineer or it doesn't matter what job you're in, always ask the question why.
Yes.
Because if you've got the mechanism, that leads to obvious treatments.
Yes, no,
And
absolutely.
that's what doctors do not do nowadays.
No, and it is quite frightening when it's your health.
Yes.
And you're only putting sticking plasters, and then the core reason is getting worse and worse, or just not being, it's chronic pain that you see. Now, you said to me, and I'll just quickly relate this story, is that a lot of my audience will know I've got an artificial eye. It took 4 years from having an infection, an acanthamoeba bug that got into the cornea, and having chlorhexidine, which is a chlorine bleach-based antiseptic, which, as my doctor said to me, he says, well, we can't give you the strength enough to kill it because that will blind you. So we have a weak version that won't damage the eye, but hopefully will wear this thing down. Anyway, the upshot was, in the end, I had to have 3 cornea transplants. That didn't work. My eye also, I think, had MRSA from going into hospital. I had sclerosis, I think it's called, where the white goes completely red. And after 4 years, lots of chronic pain, and feeling suicidal at one point.
Of course.
I just said, you've got to take it out, because it looked a mess.
Yeah.
And I was in the entertaining profession, and I couldn't go on with this eye that frightened the audience. So I said, whip it out, I'll have an artificial one. And of course, as a result of that, I've not looked back, excuse the pun. But you said to me something which on the one hand is brilliant, but on the other hand made me wince. And you said,
iodine it kills all microbes and it penetrates through all flesh. And I would put money on iodine sorting your eye out.
So yeah, I could have still kept the eye, but there you go. So if anybody's got those sort of things, then there are much easier and simpler and effective remedies. Anyway, let's go back to so we were dealing with dementia. Did we finish off the dementia?
Yes, dementia is low carb diet, fish oils, and sort out your homocysteine, and you do that by taking B vitamins.
Right.
And then cancer. Cancer is a major killer.
Yes.
And President Nixon, announced a war on cancer in the 1970s, and that's not made one jot of difference to the prevalence and death rates from cancer. And again, it goes back, we have to ask ourselves, why are cancer cells different from normal cells? And we knew the answer in the 1930s. Otto Warburg, he was nominated 42 times for the Nobel Prize. Otto Warburg demonstrated the fundamental difference between cancer cells and normal cells is cancer cells can only run on sugar.
Right.
And so if you're consuming sugars and carbohydrates, you are feeding cancer cells. Now, one of my favourite authors is Professor Nick Lane. He writes wonderful books on biochemistry and evolutionary biology. And I've been rereading his book, Transformer. Now, and he explains a likely mechanism by which we are causing cancer through energy delivery mechanisms, because we make energy in the body through a nasty bit of biochemistry called the Krebs citric acid cycle. It's a cycle that goes round and round and absorbs energy and water molecules and oxygen and spits out energy molecules in the form of ATP. And that cycle has to go round in a particular direction, and it does. But if we overwhelm the body with sugars and carbohydrates, and we don't draw energy from that cycle through exercise, then the cycle can go into reverse. Now, going to reverse is actually an important part of growth, but if it goes into reverse too often, too much, that feeds cancer. So what he's saying essentially is, and we know that restricting calories is one of the most well-recognised ways of living to 100. Don't overeat and exercise. Now, it doesn't mean sprinting around the
Olympic. So nothing Olympic type.
Not Olympic, just pottering around. Yes. Now, I don't know. You've probably watched the Blue Zone series on Netflix. I think.
Don't have a television. I'm afraid.
Okay.
So.
Well, I did, because it's all about how to live to 100. And this wonderful investigator goes around parts of the world: Okinawa, Sardinia, Costa Rica, looking at why, and in those areas people live to great ages. There's a higher density of centenarians in those areas than any other part of the world.
Wow.
And so he's going around asking the question why. And guess what? They're all slim, There's no such thing as a fat centenarian. And they're all physically active every day of their life, either because they've got to walk to go places, or they're growing their own fruit and vegetables, or they're chopping wood. There's a wonderful section of a centenarian, splitting up wood, this huge axe that he was wielding.
Fantastic.
It was fantastic, but they're all physically active, they're all slim, and they're all eating locally grown foods, which are plant-based, low carbohydrate, with yes, fish, meat and eggs thrown in as well. And what he didn't point out, which I think is just as important, is they all live in warm, sunny climates.
Yeah, so if you're living in Britain, I mean, we're just about to go into the winter here, which maybe we've had, a month of reasonably hot weather, which is quite, in recent years, is quite rare, but we don't have that much. So do we have much of a chance? We
can compensate, because one of the most important things that comes from sunshine is vitamin D.
Yes.
And if you don't take vitamin D in this country, I guarantee you will be deficient, or you'll have less than optimal levels. And my view is we all need to take vitamin D, 10,000 IU daily. Sounds like a big dose, but that's the equivalent of between 15 minutes and an hour of sunshine, which, guess what, all those blue zone characters were getting on a daily basis for life. So 10,000 IU vitamin D is absolutely crucial.
And how do you know whether on your pills? Because I've heard you say that before, or other people say it, and you look, and sometimes the measurements on the pills come in different ways, so you don't always know whether it's 1 pill a day, 2, or that sort of thing. It's very tricky.
Well, they either come in international units or micrograms, and there's a 40-fold difference between the two.
Right.
So 10,000 international units is equivalent to 250 micrograms, but in this country it's nearly always international units. So you just need to see that 10,000 on the bottle and you have arrived.
Right, brilliant. Okay, so at least 10,000 of those, which might be 1 pill a day.
Correct.
And you're all right, but if the sun comes out, then get out in it as well.
Absolutely, get out in it. And of course, the other reason why sun is very helpful is because it keeps us warm.
Yes.
And we all know being cold kills people.
Yes.
And it's all very well the government say turn your central heating down by a couple of degrees, but it ain't much fun, is it?
No. Well, I don't have any. You'll notice in here there is, apart from the lights, which are only LEDs, there's no heating in my house. There's a gas fire there, but I don't have the gas switched on. And I've been here for 30 years, and so I have to have a wood-burning stove. So in the winter, very much I hibernate in the kitchen where the wood-burning stove is, because I know it can get very, very cold.
Absolutely.
But I'm not a great fan of dry central heating.
Well, me neither, and I too am very privileged. I too just heat I have no central heating. I just heat my house with a wood-burning stove, and I love it. I'm a pyromaniac. I love stoking it with logs and cooking on it. And
it is quite fun. And also, I mean, just in an off way, it reminds you the primeval world, I suppose, by cooking by fire. And one of the things that we've been exploring is all the amount of electrical magnetics and things that radiate, which also don't help, probably.
Absolutely, and there are some, Professor Martin Paul, for example, maintains that the electrical pollution we get from Wi-Fi, from mobile phones and is extremely damaging to us, and I'm quite sure he's right. So we should all be doing what we can to try to minimise that. So
cancer is fed on these sugars and all of that, which of course is to a huge degree is in our control if we can control our desire to eat sugars and chocolates and.
Correct, and once people realise that it's an addiction, then they understand why they're craving it, why they're getting withdrawal symptoms, and that very much helps. But believe you me, I'm as good an addict as any. And the way I do my sugar addiction is I don't have any of it, because I have the self-control to say no to the first bit, but not the second or third or the fourth.
Right.
I mean, if you gave me a bar of chocolate and I had a square, the whole bar would disappear.
Yes.
Get
some chocolate for the one. Test
See if
it
you
out.
can tempt her.
But I know what you mean, because you just think, I'll just have one bit, and then the mouth is already going, oh, that was nice, and the body is suddenly summing up.
Correct.
And Julia and I do like a bit of chocolate, and sometimes we say to each other in the evening, oh, it'd be nice to have a bit of chocolate. but we haven't got any in the house.
Yes.
And sometimes you just think, by the time we sort of think, oh, we could go to the corner shop or it's shut. Oh, well, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
And the urge is gone.
Correct. And again, that's a very useful tip, because if people get the real urge to have something, what I say is, have a glass of water and say, I'll revisit that in 10 minutes' time. And in 10 minutes' time, you've forgotten about it.
Yeah.
So that's a little technique that
does make a lot.
helps. That sometimes helps. And that goes for all addictions, whether it's a glass of wine or a cigarette or whatever. Say, I'll have a glass of water and hang on and come back to that, and you forget.
And in the society today, that convenience, I mean, I mentioned having the corner shop, it's even then, if you haven't got it in the house, it's not that far, and your craving can draw you out of the house. Whereas if you're living in the country or you're living in a society where it's a real effort to get these things, you'd soon not have that craving.
Correct.
Because you wouldn't have. And that's how convenience is not always on your side.
No, it certainly is not. I was just reading a biography of the medieval court, and about a third of the energies of the medieval court did nothing but acquire food. Hunt it down, skin it, butcher it, hang it up, slaughter it, cook it, whatever. A huge amount of energy. And now I understand about 8% of income goes into actual food, whereas in the medieval court it's clearly more like 33%, possibly more.
And that's something else. I mean, just talking about the wood-burning stove business, I find that because I have to light my Essie, I go out, chop the wood, bit of exercise, clean it out, get the thing stoked up. It takes, depending on what part you want to cook on it, half an hour to an hour to get some sort of temperature, and because it's not on all the time.
Yeah.
And then, whilst that's going on, I'm preparing the food, and I might be nibbling on the odd raw bit of stuff. Celery, yeah. And then you cook it, and by the time you cook it, you're really ready for it. But I think what it is rather than just nipping to having a ready-made food, which in and of itself is not terribly healthy, but it's just that process of spending time thinking and creating a desirable meal. And very often, you think, oh, does that mean that the meal is incredibly rich with sauces and syrups and things? No, it's very basic a lot of the time, but it just takes a bit of time. And I love that because in the day I'm busy doing the channel and stuff.
Yep.
And it's just that sort of calming down, slowly cutting up vegetables, stoking the fire and pottering.
Absolutely. I mean, I cook obviously for Tony, and then I have a tribe who I live with, and I usually end up doing most of the cooking. So most evenings I cook for at least 4 and usually 6 and sometimes 8 people. And it might allow 2 hours for that, but I love that because I'm cooking a bit, I'm stoking that, then I'm doing the crossword a bit, and I'm hopping up and down. And producing food for people is a way of saying you love them, isn't it?
Yes.
And that is reciprocated around the table. Oh, this is delicious, isn't it good?
And do you have people in the kitchen at the same time? They're coming and going?
Oh yeah, coming and going.
I mean, Julia and I will cook. When Julia's over, we'll cook, and it's great because we'll have conversation.
Yes, exactly.
We're not just got the food, sat in front of the telly, getting facts.
Correct. We sit round the table and have a chat about the events of the day and what have you done, what needs doing in the garden, what must we do tomorrow, and there's always some gossip that needs sharing.
So we've done the dimension of the cancer and the other one, heart
disease. Yes.
So and of course we're seeing a lot of that at the moment for various reasons.
Huge. And dare I say it, it's the same old play. It's sugars and carbohydrates are fundamental. Homocysteine is fundamental because we damage our arteries. The lining of arteries is a very delicate lining, and blood is coursing through it. And if blood goes through at a high pressure, and we get the high pressure, remember, when we spike adrenaline, and we get adrenaline, of course, when the blood sugars drop.
Right.
That damages the lining of blood vessels. And we heal and repair that with cholesterol, and we heal and repair that with homocysteine. So the point is, if you've got high or low homocysteine, then we don't heal and repair efficiently. And if we've got abnormal cholesterols, that's not a cause of arterial disease, it's a symptom of arterial disease. And it's not the total cholesterol that's critical, it's the amount of the friendly cholesterol, the HDL cholesterol. So if you've got good levels of HDL cholesterol, by which I mean I like to see it above 2, then it tells us you're not damaging your arteries and your chance of having arterial damage is fairly low. I'm not in the least bit worried about the total cholesterol. And Asim Malhotra, who's just written a book, A Statin-Free Life, he's a cardiologist, consultant cardiologist. He likes to see the cholesterol above 6 and maybe nearer 7 or 8, because that doesn't cause arterial disease. And the risible paradigm we have of a high-fat diet causes high cholesterol, causes arterial disease is wrong, wrong, wrong. But of course, it's a very simple one for Big Pharma, and it's a very simple one for the population. Think, oh, high cholesterol equals must take statins.
And yes, because I saw a Steam on a video that was on the BBC in which
Yes.
he was suggesting actually there's a huge amount of prescription of statins, and people are on these things for donkey's years, and they don't need to be.
Atorvastatin is the single most sold drug in the world. It's worth about $1 trillion a year. Now, you can pay for a lot of propaganda with that. But the benefit of statins is marginal. It's next to nothing. And I said to Asim, how do you get away with, telling your patients not to take statins? Oh, he said, I don't do that. He says, I just give them the statistics. And when they hear the statistics, they say, well, I shan't be bothering to take that, shall I?
Yeah.
And this is what we should be doing. I mean, the word doctor comes from the Latin. It means docere, to teach. We should be teaching our patients, our people, our clients, whatever you call them, to do the right things to optimize their health, not prescribing in a mindless way. I mean, people come and see me and they're on shopping lists of drugs, and I say, well, what are you taking that for? I don't know.
Right.
They absolutely don't know why they're taking these wretched medications.
Yeah.
And the difference between a drug and a nutritional supplement, for example, is drugs work by inhibition. They block biochemical systems. As I call it, they increase the friction in the system so it goes slowly. But by contrast, nutritional supplements work by facilitating the biochemistry. They give us the raw material, the zinc, the B vitamins, the essential fatty acids, for those biochemical reactions to flow more easily. So they reduce the friction in the system. And that's what we should be doing. We should be living a life that is as frictionless as is possible, because then our biochemistry works more efficiently, with less free radicals and toxic molecules, and therefore less damage to the body.
Yes.
And so that is because people worry about, sometimes say, I'm taking all these nutritional supplements, isn't that bad for me? No. If you're taking a good package of nutritional supplements, some good vitamins, some good minerals, some good essential fatty acids, they allow our biochemistry to flow, and that's the aim of the game.
It's interesting you're saying about the doctors teaching or prescribing in a way, and actually, as you say, if you show them the stats and you say, well, you make the decision,
yes.
not for the doctor to say, well, I think you should have this, and there's no other choice. And we know that doctors generally may well have a bias of certain prescriptions that they want to sell because there may be a financial interest in that.
I know, and that is shocking. I mean, any doctor should not have any vested interest in the tests that they arrange or the prescriptions that they deliver. And the shocking thing is that many do. But as you probably know, my special area of interest is treating people with chronic fatigue syndrome, and there are not enough therapists to go round. And so the first lesson I tell my patients is, I've got to teach you to be a doctor for yourself, because there's nobody better placed, better motivated, better empowered, better able to track your responses to treatments than you. And treating people is like playing cricket, and I'm a cricket fan, I love cricket. I give them, as I call it, the rules of the game and the tools of the trade for them to heal themselves. And it's the same in cricket. All cricketers play by the same rules, by the same tools, but everybody plays it differently.
Yes.
And they're immediately recognisable from the way they bat, the way they bowl, the way they move in the field. You can see who's who. And it's the same in medicine. We need to teach our patients, let's say, the rules of the game and the tools of the trade so that they can do it themselves.
And do you think that if you go back, say, 150, 200 years, people were a bit more in tune with their body and the things that were going wrong, and because to go to you either went to, say, the wise woman or the herbalist or something like that, or the very expensive doctor in the 17th century, 18th century as a profession, whose of course their knowledge back then was even more shaky, and various quacks with elixirs of life and all of that. So people probably must have had a much more intuitive understanding.
Correct. And you're probably aware of Nicholas Culpeper, who was
I've got his book on the
and you know
shelf.
his wonderful quote at the front. There are three people who disease us. There are physicians who disease the body. There are priests who disease the soul, and there are lawyers who disease our estates.
Yes.
And I think he was
so true.
And I don't think much has changed today.
No.
But I'll tell you another story just to illustrate that point. Both my grandparents were doctors. My grandmother's one of the first women doctors. She qualified in 22, and my grandfather's a doctor too. And in the 1920s, they were visiting patients. It was all private, of course, and they went out in horse and carriage to visit, the rich, the wealthy people at home. And my grandfather had a difficult case once, and so he asked a London consultant to come out and opine. And the way that it happened is that the two doctors would then examine the patient in one room and then go and discuss the features, in another room to come up with a plan. And this London consultant said to my father, "Well, I think this is a chest case." And my grandfather said, No, he's got symptoms in his gut. No, he said, a chest case, a treasure chest. So, they had many of them had
motivation.
their eyes to the money then.
Oh, that's so. I mean, it's fascinating how we've become less and less in control of so many things in life, but in particular, our intuition on us.
Absolutely. And again, there's a wonderful book written by Kelly Turner called Radical Remission. And she decided to go investigate cases of cancer that had spontaneously remitted, i.e. people who had been given a terminal diagnosis. You're only going to live another few weeks and that's it, no more therapy for you. But they recovered. And she went and interviewed them to see what they did to make the difference. And there's a list of 9 things that she suggests. And number 1 was they all changed their diet radically. But number 2 was they all took control of their health. And they said, blow this for monkeys, I'm not damn well going to die. I wanted to get this done, I want to get that done. They all had a project they wanted to complete.
Right.
And they all completely reversed their cancers. And what would have made the difference there is the immune system, because the immune system has the ability to cure us, whatever state we find ourselves in. And I can't tell the difference between the brain and the immune system. Both are intelligent, responsive to neurotransmitters, make good decisions. They're conscious, but the immune system is subconscious. And I think if you've got a happy brain, you've got a happy immune system. If you've got a focused, determined brain, you've got a focused, determined immune system. By contrast, if you're sad and depressed, your immune system's going to be sad and depressed, and it ain't going to work.
But Dr. Myhill, we've recently been told that these drugs are better than our immune system, have we not? Certainly in a certain medical intervention that was offered to us rather persuasively, because our own immune system wasn't working. How can you say our immune system is so good?
Well, if you look after your immune system will look after you. And the immune system wants you to live, obviously, and it just needs the raw materials. And if you are in the business of fighting infection, the last thing you must do is feed that infection with sugars and carbohydrates. And then you give the immune system the tools that it needs to kill. And one is vitamin C. It's so important. And there is a huge volume of work, Fred Klenner, Robert Cathcart spring to mind, demonstrating how vitamin C in high doses can cure almost any infectious disease. I mean, Klenner was injecting vitamin C to children with polio and curing them completely.
Wow.
And now I understand all these wonderful tools we have, which are nutritional supplements, they're herbal supplements or whatever. It means we don't have to worry about infections. We don't have to worry about vaccinations because they become irrelevant. We have the tools. And what has stopped this COVID epidemic is natural immunity, because we've all come in contact with the virus. Some of us have not had symptoms, but we've all come in contact with it, and we've all acquired natural immunity, and that's what's seen the end of the epidemic. And of course there will be new viruses coming in. They're called flu viruses. We get a new one every year, don't we? And if you've got good energy delivery mechanisms, low sugar diets, and you're taking a good package of supplements, you won't suffer from that flu. I haven't had a cold or a flu for 35 years since knowing all this.
Wow.
I've never missed a day's work. I had one day when I felt a bit off, but it didn't stop me working. Because we have the tools to deal with it. And these are all tools that we have evolved with over hundreds of thousands of years. And those are the tools we should be employing.
So let's go back to your chap who's 101. His life as we said at the beginning, extraordinary amount of change. What would you say, I mean, apart from obviously the last few years that you've been looking after him, what other things do you think have influenced his health and kept him on that direction of longevity? I mean, one of the things I can imagine that going through the war, people were not overeating,
Correct.
Things like that.
Correct.
And you often see these pictures of people at wartime, 1940s, and you always say, my God, how slim they are.
Exactly. I know, if you watch the old series like Z Cars or something like on the telly, or then they're all skinny little people running around.
Yes.
And we just got used to seeing people who are a different shape now.
Yes, and clothes size is going up, and you go, hang on, I want a waistcoat that will fit me. I'm quite small, as my friends keep telling me.
But yes, as you say, in the war, the rations were rations, and so you were necessarily slim. He then worked for 13 years in Nigeria, in Africa, as a district officer, and everywhere he went, he walked or he rode. So he was physically active then, and it's certainly not over-consuming food, because that would not have been in abundance.
And presumably a lot of sunshine as well.
Lots of sunshine.
Lots of sunshine.
He was very lucky he was able to retire early when he was 60 years old, because you could in those days. And he got himself a little boat. And in the summer he went boating, and in the winter he was riding horses. He was still riding out racehorses, at the age of 85.
Wow!
When his back gave up on him, and he then, in fact, I run a ride across Wales once a year. And he did that ride on my old horse Maggie. Obviously, we didn't insist he jumped off and did every gate. We left him on board, but he completed. So being physically active and eating well are probably the two single most important things
yes.
you can be.
And I mean, most people will know that we have become so much more sedentary, and our work has become sedentary.
Yes.
You think back to all those things that people did with their hands. They were much more engaged with things. Machines have taken over and taken away a lot of that, which, nobody wants to stay stuck in a field for 8 hours, back-breaking, digging ditches. But
they did. Again, when we moved to Upper Western first, we inherited a farm worker who'd never worked anywhere other than Upper Western.
Wow.
And he was born in 1922. And he describes how in the 1930s they would cut fields of hay by hand with a big scythe.
Yes.
And as soon as it was light and the dew was off, they would start cutting. And they would cut through until it was dark, so maybe 14 or 16 hours of labour. And he was powered by cider. And the ration was about 8 pints of cider throughout the course of the day, because of course it was rehydrate you, the alcohol would give you energy, and you just kept going and going and going.
So much sugar in cider?
Well, yes, but he was burning it off instantly.
Right.
Instantly.
Right.
And of course the problem with modern days is that sugar makes us fatigued. And therefore there's a vicious cycle there, isn't there? Because we have sedentary jobs, which are maybe stressful.
Yes.
We use sugar to deal with that stress. And then we haven't got the energy to do something about our sedentary jobs. We haven't got the energy to go for a walk in the morning or go for a walk in the evening or whatever, because.
Yeah.
So it's a real vicious cycle of ignorance and addiction that spirals us downhill into bad health. And you don't have to look far to see how unhealthy we are.
No. Well, I've been reading over the last few years a load of these old 1920s, 1930s books on farming, because I've been fascinated by that.
A.J. Street, I love him, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And all those, the time before electricity, and you read about how electricity was just coming into the village, and they were going, oh, I don't want these bright lights coming in here, there's a light and everything, I want to keep with my little thing. And same with water, they would draw water from wells and things instead of the pipe water. But it was that getting up, going off to work, in a community, going to the pub, working really hard.
Yes.
And nobody really, apart from perhaps, I don't know, your odd accountant or something, or the banker who was sitting there, was sitting still for any length of time.
Correct.
And now you see huge offices, these big tower office blocks, where people would sit in. And I used to entertain in some of these on incentive days where people were selling, and they'd be on the phone desperately trying to sell stuff, and we'd play these games like grab a grand. If you sold £10,000 worth of computers, you'd go into this booth, and so people, and all day long they're sitting there eating chocolates and cakes and all of this. And yes, they're making lots of money. And I noticed that many of the reps there had these very flash cars, but they got in at 7 in the morning and they left at 7. So the car was really just conveying them. They didn't get much pleasure out of these trinkets.
No.
Because they were still sitting under horrible light, artificial light, in front of the screens, eating all this crap food.
I know.
And then perhaps just going to the pub and getting blatted at the end. And this lifestyle that so many people live is so unhealthy.
Yeah, and actually that point about going to the pub and getting blatted, again, that's you always know the people who are the serious drinkers because they drink very quickly on an empty stomach because that gives them the hit.
Right.
So what we're looking for with addiction is not the total amount of alcohol, it's the hit. And so the faster you drink and on the emptier the stomach is, the quicker you get that hit. So, for example, the reason why opiate addicts like to inject the opiate directly into the vein is because they get that hit much faster and that gives them a better buzz or a better high, as you call it. You can also tell the alcoholics, if they have a spirit, they will inhale it. So they will sip it and then they'll inhale into the lungs, because from the lungs it's straight to the heart and then next stop the brain, so they get a much better hit. So that's the point about addiction, it's the rate of change that makes the hit.
So I mean, what you've just been saying in the last 45 minutes, and we'll draw this to a close in a second, but has been great advice, and it's not prescriptive because people can make the choice themselves. And sometimes you get this sort of feeling that people say, oh, well, it's already telling us this, we want to live our lives as we can. And of course people can, they can make that choice.
Absolutely.
But if you want to live to 100,
yes,
and that's the thing that I find fascinating is people don't think about perhaps 20 years hence. They're thinking of now when they're young and they go, oh, I can smoke 20 of these a day, I can drink this, nothing ever affect me. And I think to myself, but what will your future life say?
Correct. Because I say, yes, I want to live to 100, but I want to live well to 100.
Yes.
And so much, it's not just the things that kill us, heart disease and cancer and dementia that kill us, it's the other things like arthritis. We know so much arthritis is driven by sugars and carbs because it's allergy to microbes from the upper fermenting gut. And arthritis is pain.
Yes.
And I'm a wimp. I don't like pain.
No, and you see, and they say, oh, but you're living longer, and you think, yes, but you're living longer with chronic pain.
Correct. That's no good at all. The woman who lived the longest documented is Jeanne Calment. She lived to the age of 122. She was a French woman, and she had good genes, but she lived but what helped is she was wealthy. So that meant she didn't have any stress in her life. She could live in a comfortable Paris flat. She played the piano, she played tennis, she rode her bicycle everywhere. She ate good Parisian food, which was then organic. And she lived to a great age, 122. But she lived well. She was still lecturing at the age of 120, at 120.
Oh my God.
So her brain was obviously active.
Yes.
She obviously didn't have any pathology because she lived 122. But she was very abstemious in things that she did, and she was physically active. Again, one of the nice tips I love from the Blue Zone film was they said, eat to 80% of your fullness and then stop. Don't eat until you're stuffed full.
Right.
So just eat slowly. And again, that's important because you don't get that hit of food. Many people gobble their food and eat it too quickly. A bit. Well, I know, and we do it because of time and we're pressurised, but we should take, just like you're taking time over preparing your food, you should take time over your eating your food. And you should chew it a bit, then you put it down, you sit back and you have a little chat and a giggle and a laugh, and then you pick up your knife and fork and eat a little bit more. And that's where being sociable around a table, you eat more slowly because you're chatting as well.
Yes.
And again, being lonely can have an impact for as much as 15 years on your life expectancy.
Really? Gosh.
So we are sociable creatures. We are sociable beasts. We survive on social interactions, and we should.
Yes.
And just meeting somebody in the street, saying hi, or having a chat in the shops, whatever, is very good for our health.
And what period did this lady who lived to 122 die?
Oh, I think she died in about the late 1990s.
Right.
And the point of that is she would have been born when all the food was organic.
I was going to say, she didn't have these things, the
chemicals,
chemtrails in the skies, the fluoride in the
poisons.
water,
Correct.
or this modern day stupor that we're in, that we're fighting.
In fact, that's another reason why I love iodine so much, because iodine is obviously a halide, which means it pushes out other halides. And we have 2 toxic halides in our diet. One is fluoride in water, as you've just said, but the other is methyl bromide, is a pesticide, and it's widely used in millions of kilograms a year to fumigate, to sterilize, and to clean up. But it inevitably gets through into our food, and we are being poisoned by bromide. And at the moment, I'm seeing an epidemic of people with underactive thyroids, and I'm quite sure it's the fluoride and the bromides that are poisoning the thyroid gland, and there's just not enough iodine to keep those toxins at bay.
So we put drops of iodine in water,
Lovely.
Filtered water,
Lovely.
And we drink that usually before bed.
Fantastic. You must have picked up on what I said at the last interview.
Yes, I think so. We listened to that a few times. And that's that's why you're back, really, is to sort of reinforce the message. But we do that, and we take magnesium.
Fantastic.
We use the snoot pipe or the salt pipe.
Terrific. That'll stop you getting respiratory infections. That's a wonderful tool.
And there's a weed just outside my door which I need to tackle. That the spores make me sneeze and give me. And I know it's that because I'll sit out there, put my feet on the earth to try and ground myself a bit, get rid of all these radiation things. But then it will attack me, and I get this. But I go straight to the what we call the snoot pipe, the salt pipe, with the Himalayan salt in and a couple of drops of iodine.
Yep.
Inhale that, and it goes.
Well, I'm so pleased you say that, because iodine is yes, it's very good anti-infection, but it's also anti-allergy. And any insect bites, you get horsefly bites, wasp stings, mosquito bites, it doesn't matter. Put the iodine on directly. So you get a nice orange patch on your skin, and the itch and the swelling just disappears. And there's another reason why this is very important, because we're currently seeing epidemics of Lyme disease. Most people now know somebody in this country has Lyme disease. In America, the figures were, and these are slightly outdated figures, the figures were that Lyme disease is increasing at the rate of 1,000 new cases every day. Now, Lyme comes from not just ticks, but from all biting insects. A friend of mine, doctor, had a picnic in Hyde Park, came away, bullseye rash, got tested. She tested for Lyme disease. So anywhere in this country, you can be bitten by an insect and with the potential to pick up Lyme. And that's another reason why to dob it with iodine. Because if you have got Lyme there, then the iodine will penetrate the skin, and there's a chance, I wouldn't say guarantee, but it's biologically plausible that you can nip that infection in the bud before it manifests clinically.
Right. Wow. There we go. That's worth knowing. Well, we better draw this to a close, but I think we may have to ask you to come back, because people love it, and we had such good response. Now, you do a salt. You still doing your salt?
Yes, except the last time it sold out.
I'm so sorry.
It sold out the next day. I mean, the girls say, "What have you been doing?" We had a lovely stock, and now we've got none.
Yes, and we've been using that in the cooking. So just to take us through your salt, because I know that, and we mentioned this before, and Julia and I mentioned this, that we often take Celtic sea salt with water, but now you've improved on that because you've added minerals to it.
That's right. Because of the way of modern agriculture, there is a one-way cycle of trace elements from the soil, plants, animals, us, and we discard into the rivers, don't we? So all our foods are now deficient in those minerals. Now, people in this country hate taking supplements, but they don't mind taking salt. So I made up a salt, which I call sunshine salt, which is 80% sea salt, but Maldon sea salt, but the other 20% is all the essential minerals that I'm allowed to put in decent amounts, in a form that's soluble, in a form that's heat stable, and in proportion to each other. So there's all the calcium, zinc, copper, selenium, chromium, magnesium, molybdenum, iodine, DDAD, that you need to be healthy. And you just put it on your food, you put in the PK bread that you make, you put in your French dressing or whatever. And I also put in there a big dose of methyl B12, 5 milligrams per daily scoop, and vitamin D. And both those vitamins are heat stable, so you can cook with the salt and not lose any of its goodness. So yeah, that's a popular product.
So we'll put a link on there, so you better get making some more of those, because I'm sure people will be going, oh yes, we'll get another batch. which is brilliant. You have a couple of books out, or well, you've probably got a number of books out there on the ketone diet that people can follow.
Yes, absolutely. Out there's books on all these subjects. I won't bore you with telling you about them.
So I just put a link to your main website, really, and people can go and have a hunt round. Sarah, it's been an absolute joy to have you back. This time in the studio, we were in the kitchen last time, but it's got a bit colder, so we're up in here with these lights warming us up. Probably not doing us much health. But thank you so much for coming back.
It's a pleasure.
And encouraging people to look after themselves.
Yes. I say, just do it yourself. Keep it simple, do it yourself, do it well, and live to a great age and stay well and healthy.
You can't ask better than that. And in these times, worrying times, that's really what we desperately need to do. And food, in and of itself, not only being a medicine, is a joy.
Yes.
Eating good quality food and being healthy is also a joy.
And when you get rid of the addictions, then the flavours come back and you can really taste the foods and the textures and enjoy them.
I'll be back with more of my wonderful interviews, some on Zoom, some in real life, and of course the monologues every day. So thank you for coming along. Big thanks to Dr. Myhill. Till next time, from Sarah, myself, and the lovely Julia, who is just off camera.
Thank you, Julia.
Cheerio.